My name is Dave Martin. I'm the Campus Financial Services Manager here at Central Office. Also on the panel is Megan Moran, who's the AP Purchasing Supervisor. So she's really the one that does all the work. So when campus calls me with questions regarding AP purchasing, and I get back to you 9 times out of 10, I run to Megan and say, how should the campus handle this? And also on the panel is Ned Gellner, who's our Corporate Payment Compliance Manager. So let's get started. So the topics that we're gonna cover, like I said, there's only a couple things that we really wanted to cover, and then we can open it up and cover anything else. We wanted to talk about the new RF foreign entity process, also known as FATCA. It's been a hot topic with the new federal regulations that went into effect. We're also going to get into a little more of the details on the OMB uniform guidance and a summary of the procurement related requirements. On the early session when we talked about the OMB requirements, we talked about procurement being a very hot topic, and there's a lot of new stuff in procurement. I only touched on a few of the high level things. We'll get into a little more detail here since we got a more specialized group here. And then finally, we're going to talk about the new RF travel handbook and some of the hot issues around that. And then we're going to open it up for an open discussion on AP or other purchasing topics or anything else you guys want to discuss. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ned, who will discuss FATCA.
Hi, everybody. I know a lot of people in the room, but if not, as Dave said, I'm Ned Gellner, Corporate Payment Compliance Manager. So probably about midsummer, I kind of heard about FATCA, but at the same time keeping an eye on it. And then all of a sudden it was like going to become this true thing that was going to happen. So I think a lot of people around the country are hoping it wasn't going to happen or be delayed. But basically, FATCA, before I even get there, just to tell a little bit about where we are now and why and where we're going with FATCA. Right now, when we pay a non-resident alien individual, or I should say, as of in the prior year, as we paid a non-resident alien individual, we had processes and ways to pay those and make sure that we took care of payment, taxation, and compliance. When FATCA came about, it was basically a way for the government to enforce a little more to get more information. So basically a lot of companies across the country were basically not doing anything tied to this. The legislation had been in place forever, but nobody was doing anything. So they came out with this FATCA ruling, which was really part of the Hire Act, which is more HR payroll, back in 2010, and FATCA was basically a phase-in piece to that. The key things to think about with, or actually to step back again, so we pay the non-resident alien individuals and things of that sort, but we would pay foreign entities. We have a way in our system to put them as a category called foreign suppliers, companies and organizations. So we had it identified in our system, but we didn't really apply any tax and reporting rules, and that's what FATCA basically does. The biggest thing on non-resident aliens, there's two-level process. The first level is what's called IRS sourcing, where you have to define whether it's a U.S. source entity or a foreign source entity, and then you apply tax and reporting rules. So the FATCA actually stands for Foreign Account Tax Act. As I kind of mentioned, it's enhancement or a reinforcement of U.S. compliance rules. You'll see I have financial versus non-financial institutions. FATCA is far-reaching, but not as a bigger issue for us. We are a non-financial institution. The companies that are really struggling are the banking institution, the investment companies, because the main focus of FATCA is about information. Really, it was kind of put into place to go after tax shelters, things of that sort. So they want information. So that's what FATCA is really about. It's not so much the tax, although as you go through the rules, the tax could be an issue. And FATCA comes first. So when we're paying a foreign entity, you apply the FATCA rules, which kind of, to shortcut it to all of it, is give us information, provide us a W-8 form, things of that sort. They just want the information. Once the information is obtained, then you can move on to tax and withholding rules. So that's what the government wants. They want the information, and that's what we've been implemented at this point. We're getting all the information we need. And if in the end, it comes down to what's taxable, reportable income, such as services or royalties or things of that sort, then we have to apply the actual default rule with any NRA payment, which is 30%. So, go ahead and go to the next slide. So what we've basically done is gone through the whole FATCA legislation and figured out how do we do that here at the Research Foundation. So anybody that's been involved, you saw that we created a form, PDF fill-in form. The first form is all about sourcing, and I kind of mentioned that before. So the highest level hierarchy of exclusion from all of these rules is if it's foreign source, meaning it's a foreign source entity. And that's a term the IRS uses, source, which I don't like it at all, because it's really, with every kind of payment classification, it's really different rules, but with foreign entities, it's about how much of a presence do they have in the U.S. If their presence is totally outside the U.S., they do their business from outside the U.S., they're a foreign entity. Once that's defined or figured out, once that form is sent into us, your job's done, our job's done. It's on the supplier file as being recognized as foreign source. Now behind the scenes we have an edit that looks at all these payments, and that edit will stop a payment if we don't have a sourcing in there or it has to be tax reported. So if it's foreign source, that edit bypasses. It'll go ahead and pay that foreign entity. If it's U.S. source, then we have to apply other rules. So you see U.S. source, we have to apply those rules. I talked about the 30% rule. But that rule is really like a default last issue thing. It's like when we run into those situations and it's a U.S. source entity, we're usually conversing with that entity like, we need a W-8 form that shows that you, there's a series of different W-8 forms. So it could be one that's called an EI-BCI. It could be the new form they created, which is called a W-8-BEME. But there's a series of W-8 forms. If we get that form and those payments are excluded via either treaty exemption or the ECI means effectively connected, then there's no issue as far as taxation. But we still have to report it on a 1042S. One thing that is kind of forgotten though is if it's still goods, supplies, things of that sort, it's again also excluded. This is only about what they call taxable reportable income. So if it's services, an independent contractor, if it's royalties, the other ones that we report in our system, or whether it's like a rent payment. Those situations are when the tax rule has to be applied, and in the end, if it's an issue, it's the 30% has to be withheld. So we implemented this January 1. Megan and I conversed back and forth many times about different things to put in the system, and Megan has been a tremendous help with that, so that's been great. And really what we're seeing is most of our foreign entities are being identified as foreign source. We do have like one entity which will actually have to get a 1042S at this point in time. So we're midway through March, and I don't know the exact numbers through March, but I think it's well over 300 that are on the report right now for all locations. So you can see that most of the times they're foreign source. Most of the times we're paying entities for supplies, a lot of lab supplies, things of that sort, so it's excludable. So there, like I said, there's been one entity that's actually providing services that is a U.S. source entity, U.S. source, even though it's a non-foreign entity that we're dealing with at this point. So, like I said, FATCA is far-reaching all over the place. You'll even see on the IRS W-9 form, which is for U.S. citizens and resident aliens, there's a piece that talks about FATCA and mark in a box and things. But that's really tied to, they want account information for banks and people's accounts, investments and things like that. So the good news is that it doesn't affect us as much as it does the banking and investment institutions. Any questions? So it was more about the government getting information, and certainly that's what we're seeing. So we implemented that January 1, and of course things are going pretty smooth. Yeah. We do the sourcing for, you all send the sourcing, the PDF sourcing form into us. We then entered it in the system. In the meantime, when we get those sourcings in, we actually send a letter to the entity explaining the FATCA rules. A lot of entities and companies are struggling mightily to implement this. We may be like cutting edge way ahead of everybody because we did it in like a manual process, but systems don't house the information they need to do it automated. So And fortunately, we're able to administer it manually, so. Okay, any questions?
Yeah, when we inquire with the supplier, I send off the W8NE form, and a lot of times I'll review it, but it doesn't look like it's complete. Do you follow up with them after the fact? Because that's a pretty difficult form.
Yeah, basically the information as it comes through. Did everybody hear that question? Okay, so when he actually corresponds with the entity, he'll send the WAB form, BENE entity form. And
That's the correct form, correct?
Well-
That's the updated form?
Sort of. We always want to start with the sourcing evaluation, because if the sourcing is foreign, you don't have to worry about the W-8 form. But if it's a U.S. source entity, the W-8BNE is the right form. But you also, once we define that sourcing and you send it in to us, we're sending a letter to them saying that the U.S. source letter is about 2 pages long, and foreign source letter is 1 page long. Because foreign source, there's no issues. But the U.S. source is explaining to them, basically, they're subject to 30% unless they provide us a W-8
Yeah,
form.
because I also ask a couple questions if it's foreign source, if their business is conducted outside of the U.S.
Right.
Do they have any offices in the U.S.? And everything I've done is come back foreign source.
Right.
But I'm sending that form also. Should I not send them that form?
Yeah, if they're a foreign, that's what I'm saying. If they're a foreign source, you don't even need to send them that form. And these entities, once they start figuring out what their responsibilities are, they'll figure out that IRS website. But you don't have to send that W-8 form. And if it's foreign source, it's a non-issue. You didn't need to send it anyway. And that's not to say I'm getting W-8BEN forms in from entities, but we don't even really need them. If they're foreign source, then it's a moot point. It's great, they give us a W-8BNE, we can attach it to the file, but it's not really relevant on a foreign source entity.
Because I forward that IRS sourcing form that I fill out, plus the email that I get from the supplier answering those questions with the W8NE, and I know the Megan's attached to it.
Yeah, I think
Right.
you and I have gone back and forth, so we attach it to the supplier header of the
Right,
record.
right.
Yeah. So if I could just chime in.
Sure,
So I think everyone, just to get back to basics with like attachments and stuff in Oracle, so Ned explained the forms. So the first part is actually to fill out the supplier sourcing form first and foremost, and I think most of you are familiar with it and you've been doing, sending them in and stuff. So if it's foreign source, I do not need the invoice analysis form. I know there was some confusion at a few campuses, so you don't have to worry about that second form. The form is nice, you just click submit, it goes right to the mailbox, so we monitor that daily. As I get them in, I'll do the first preliminary review, if you will. So if it's foreign source, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at the invoice, release the hold, and then I'll send it back to you guys, letting you know I released it. If it's U.S. source, I'm waiting on that invoice analysis form, which I'll do another preliminary review before I get Ned involved, and if I see it's goods or services, again, I'll actually go in and lift the hold on that as well. So just keep in mind, we are monitoring, the mailbox and everything. If I could ask that, central office, we run the holds report a couple times a day based on that actual hold foreign entity review. You guys at the campuses can do it too. I think some of you just don't realize you had something, everyone's busy and they quickly enter payments and stuff, and a lot of times they'll email and they don't realize they went on hold. So if you just run that invoice on hold report for that specific parameter, you could just see any invoices that you currently have on hold too. So just a couple things. And so after Ned sends out his forms, just to give you a background on that, he sends his letter to the company, he sends it back to me, I go in the supplier file and actually attach everything there, and that's where I'm going to identify it as either foreign or U.S. source, so that the next time you do pay them, hopefully, depending on what it was, it won't be placed on hold again and it'll be golden. But I don't do it initially just because Ned has to do his process. So any questions on the Oracle aspect of it?
That's a great point. We don't even need the second form, which is invoice analysis. We don't need that unless it's a U.S. source entity. Thank you. Can't think of anything else I might have missed.
No, I think that's the basics. Does anybody have any questions on FATCA?
Yes.
Kira?
I've gone into the supplier file to check to see foreign entities, so I like to send you a form again for the G10. And it says foreign or U.S., so I don't know what that means. How do I identify that it is foreign and I only have to send you the form again?
So it'll be already checked. If it's already,
I see a check mark.
If you don't, then you can, safe to say, it hasn't been reviewed by any other campus at that time. So you're gonna have to go ahead and do the sourcing on it. Yeah, because it is only updatable by central office staff, so it's only us here that actually goes in and actually checks that. But if you don't see anything, then it's on you too.
Yeah, so what you're seeing there is just a description, and then there would be
Yep.
another piece of data saying it's foreign or it's US.
And another thing is the attachments below, like where the W-9s are, all those forms and the letters Ned sends, I attach there, so you'll see that as well.
Okay, all right, good.
Yep.
And for us, compliance-wise, that's our compliance. It's more documentation than it is actually applying any tax or withholding. It's more about documentation, and that's what FATCA is more about, is having the information on hand. And of course, what it does is it's our proof to doing it properly under the FATCA legislation.
So have you had any foreign entities that have done business within the U.S. that have had to also apply for a TIN number along with their?
I'm sure there was some correspondence here or there, but it ends up being their responsibility to go get the TIN.
Right.
On our side, if we were in a mode where we had to pay somebody in that situation, as long as we take 30%, believe it or not, the government kind of understands. Of course, I've talked to IRS people and said, so you're not going to penalize us? Well, no, but we understand that these non-residents sometimes have problems getting TINs, or foreign entities have problems getting TINs. Sometimes the IRS argues and refuses to give them, and I'm like, okay, we've done our documentation.
So you would take the 30%?
Yeah, we would take the 30. Yeah. And that happens sometimes on the individual side, when we're paying individuals. We certainly have that situation. The government would look at that and say, okay, there's no 10. As long as you took the 30%, we're happy. They're always happy when you take the tax. All right, we ready to move on to the next, or is there any more questions on FATCA? I will be at the Ask the Experts tomorrow, so if anybody has more questions at that point, let me know. All right.
So moving into the uniform guidance. So I touched on some of these points earlier. The new procurement standards are probably the biggest change for the campuses. We talked about the 1-year grace period. Also mentioned that the RF is opted to accept the 1-year grace period and will continue complying with A110 through fiscal 16. And the effective date of the new requirements is July 1, 2016. Now I want to get into, I talked about the procurement clot, and I'll get into more details of the 5 aspects of procurement. So the first one is the big issue, the procurement by micro purchases up to $3,000. They're setting that $3,000 threshold. Anything over that needs bid. So if it's below it, no need for competition. But if it's over it, procurement by small purchase procedures, $3,000 to $150. It requires a solicitation of quotations from an adequate number of sources. And I mentioned earlier that COFAR has defined adequate numbers of sources to be more than 1. So 2 bids are adequate. So I mentioned that the current RF policy requires competition at $50,000 and potential for significant additional effort in your procurement office. The over $50,000 procurement by sealed bids, it's preferred in construction or other areas where price is a major component. There is a formal advertising requirement now in the OMB uniform guidance. And there's also a procurement by competitive proposals. If the services if you're not really sure exactly what you're going for, if you're going for services, there's maybe more than one solution, or you're not sure exactly what you need to purchase, the RFP is the way to go. Again, it must be publicized, and there's language that it must be awarded to the most advantageous offer with price and other factors considered. And then the 5th one is non-competitive purchases, which the RF we term as single source procurements. And this is used when the product or service is only available from one source or in other limited circumstances. So I mentioned OMB has actually spelled out the 4 specific justifiable reasons why sole source procurement would be allowable. So, and we're updating our single sole source procurement form to list out those 4 instances, and one of those 4 instances has to be satisfied and documented in order for campuses to single source a procurement. Stop me at any time if you have a question. I'm going to kind of breeze through these. Yes?
Is that for the competitive bid process for 150K and over? Is that for a commodity also, or is that just for services?
It's for services and goods, so either or. It's 100. If you have a procurement, whether it's for consulting services or it's for supplies and equipment, if it's over 150, then these thresholds, would be covered.
Does the single source need to be prior approved by RF before you can?
No,
So
no.
it's just a judgment call, kind of thing.
Right. Well, you need to be able to document that.
As long as
You have 4 standards that you need to one of the 4 standards you need to satisfy. Obviously you can be crafty in the way you document something. It all comes down to the documentation. If an independent auditor comes in and looks at it, will it stand the test of an audit? That's the question. So you really want to be careful. And if you're ever questioning whether the documentation, whether you believe that a sole source is adequate, the documentation, feel free to reach out to us and we'll let you know what our take is on it. 2 different people have 2 different opinions, but yeah, it all comes down to documentation for sole sources.
Can you tell us what the 4 requirements are?
I don't have them listed. Well, off the top of my head, I know one of them is that the service or goods is only available from 1 supplier. There is another that I think a lot of people will use where, if the PI, if it's specific to the research, there is a caveat there that you can use that as one of the fallback, which is one of the main reasons why a lot of times we'll sole source something, because there's a PI that's been using a certain chemical or reagent, and it's got to go from you have to get it from the same manufacturer. I can't think off the top of my head the other 2. I think one of them is required from a specific manufacturer, and I don't know what the 3rd one is, but they're pretty broad.
Can they be made available on the website?
Yes,
Or easily
and
accessible?
the single sole source form is being updated, so they'll list out the 4 that need to be met. So you need to meet one of those 4 requirements. So again, this doesn't go into effect till July 1, 2016, but our new single sole source form, when it gets posted, will have those requirements. And we'll be communicating heavily to the campuses leading up to July 1, 2016, so that everyone, especially your procurement folks at your campus, everyone's on board with what the new requirements are and knows that they need to use this new form. So there's going to be a lot of communication coming down the road, especially if they don't change the $3,000 threshold. So just some other changes in the procurement standards of interest. There's new language listing affirmative action steps that must be taken to ensure that MWBEs and labor surplus firms are included in procurements. So that's new language there. Everybody's favorite subject, MWBEs. There's language that a cost or price analysis is required for all procurements above the simplified acquisition threshold, which is currently at $150,000. This next bullet is a little confusing to me, but there's language that says a negotiation of profit is required for each contract over $150,000 in which there's no competition. So I'm reading this as if you single sole source something that's over $150,000, you need to work with the vendor to figure out what to have them tell you what their profit margin is on the goods or services. And I don't know about how easy that's going to be to get that information from vendors. So that's going to be an issue, and there's pushback on exactly what that means from COGR and COFAR. So in the last bullet, must maintain records sufficient to detail the history of the procurement. So this includes the rationale for the method of procurement, the selection of the contractor type, and the reasons why the contractors were selected, and basis for the contract price. So it really comes down to documentation again. When you're going out for bid and you select a vendor, you want to document why you selected a vendor and why you didn't select other vendors. So you really want to make sure that all your ducks in a row, in case these vendor files are pulled down, a couple years down the road, that you can justify the selection process for a vendor. I mentioned before that the procurement standards only apply to procurements directly charged to a federal award. There's a campus team that's been working on revamping the RF procurement policy. There's been a lot of pushback on the $3,000 threshold, and with hopes that it'll get increased either to $10,000 or even go back to the way we have it now, where institutions can set their own procurement thresholds. That's all I had for procurement standards. Any questions before we move on to travel? Willie?
Dave, for the 3,000 and above, do they recognize the MWBE vendor?
I'm sorry?
If the vendor is an MWBE, is that exempt?
Yes, so the RF procurement policy, we have an exemption in our RF procurement policy if you have procurements going to a certified MWBE vendor up to 125,000, or is it 125 or is it 200?
200.
Is it 200 right now? If it's up to 200,000, then you don't need to go out for competition.
The second question is,
You asked if it
now what Dave is saying is, if it's over, if procurement is over 3,000 onward, we can use an MWBE.
You can use the MWBE exemption, even if it's direct federal funding, we can still use that MWBE exemption.
My second question is,
Now you do need, I'm sorry, Willie, you do just need to justify the reasonableness of price. That's the only caveat there. It's got to be a reasonable price.
Does it have to be New York State certified, or it could be certified?
New York State certified, or we accept if it's certified with the federal government. It's also we allow it.
So it has to be New York State certified or federal?
Or federally certified.
So which means we can, if they say, if the vendor saying they certify in Illinois,
Right.
and that,
Yeah, that wouldn't. We say we go by either New York State certified or federally certified. And like I said, this $3,000 threshold is really going to push our procurement staffs at the campuses to use more New York State contracting, take advantage of the MWBE exemption, use more consortium contracts to help limit the number of times they need to go out for bid and issue RFPs for these. So, okay, now Megan's going to go over the RF travel handbook.
So I hope everyone's aware that we have a new RF travel handbook. It was posted September of last year. So it consolidated 25 travel documents into one comprehensive document. So is everyone aware and using this? I hope you push it out to the PIs. It'll make your life easier, their life easier. It's all in one quick document. It is easier and friendly. You just click on the link right in the table of contents. So try to push that out and roll it out to them. We did update it to include additional language from the uniform guidance that says travel dependent care costs are allowable on federal awards where, so if somebody went to a conference and their dependent care goes above and beyond, that it is now allowable. There really hasn't been too much recent changes to the travel handbook. If you guys see anything or have any questions, just let me know. I just try to push it out. I'm trying to get it out there. I know some people are trying to just find the one-off policies. I get a lot of emails on that. So direct them there. It's on the policies page on the public website right under T for travel. So I would encourage that. And also, just to put a plug in for while I'm on the topic of travel. So we have iExpense here at Central Office. A few campuses that we've rolled it out to. So if anyone's actually interested in using iExpense, it's something we already own with Oracle, so you can do all your travel reimbursements electronically, approving is all routed electronically. It's actually very nice. You upload all the information, the attachments, everything at the very end. Each campus can have their own setup. So like here at Central Office, we actually have it by supervisor and then by the project manager, whoever signs off on it. So at your campus, I know everyone's different. In the very beginning, when we did this years ago, we actually got like a cheat sheet of everyone, how they did their processes at the campus. So if it went from the PI, to the OM to this, we can make it so that it's, applicable to your own policies at your campus. So I would encourage everyone to maybe take another look at iExpense. It's a really good tool to use, and for those campuses, I know Binghamton uses it and Buff State, if you have any suggested enhancements, that's also welcome too. We can always go back and revisit the tool. Is anyone interested in?
Is there any training videos on iExpense?
Training videos, no. We do have a lot of iExpense materials. I can, send the page out if you like. We did, when we first implemented it, we had like triad session simulations, things like that. So there is a lot of documentation on it. And we did with the upgrade, when we implemented iExpense in 2011, we went with the most current version, so that with the R12, there was very minimal changes, which is a good thing. So everything that was on those training is still applicable today. It just looks a little different, so, yeah. Any questions on that? Pretty brief on the travel. Then
Travel-related question.
Sure.
So SUNY changed some of their travel rules. Is the RF thinking of changing theirs to match some of those SUNY? It's a bit more restrictive on what they need receipts for and things.
I think the RF is vague for a reason.
Okay.
So no, we don't have any plans of changing them per se. I know we do
Okay.
try to follow SUNY and follow suit, but there really isn't any, we're not looking to change anything.
Okay.
With that said, I know that the state just had a signed contract with Child's Travel, so I'm sure a lot of you deal with state and RF on both sides. So the RF is currently looking into Child's Travel and rolling it out. Their fees are pretty good. It's a 5-year contract. It's $4.95 if you book online, $14.95 if you book with a travel agent, $4.95 the rail. That was air, but for the rail it's $4.95. So it is going to be a little change because I hear on the recon end it's a little more complicated. I'm still trying to gather additional information. But just so you're aware that the state did get awarded the contract with Child's Travel, so. And I don't know how many of you know it, but the RF signed a contract with Amex Concur several years ago, so we try to utilize that here at Central Office so that we have those rates built in. I know Stony Brook, is looking to do their thing, UB might have something else, but, just some things to get thinking of as, we're trying to go towards getting away from the paper, especially with iExpense and stuff. I encourage everyone to look into it just to see how, what the tool is. I'm more than happy to give a demo and stuff. So we're trying to encourage that. Yes?
Megan, regarding the dependent care costs, what kind of backup documentation are you to get?
So according to OMB uniform guidance, you have to really beef it up. It has to be, so the person really had to have gone to the, you need a justification as to why they were needed at the conference. It's really, you got to document the whole 9 yards, why they had to go, why they had to go above and beyond for their dependent care. So just like anything, documentation is the key. Yeah. Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Any other questions on just general topics related to AP, purchasing, travel, other? Terry?
The Visa card, rebate on it, what is the percentage on that rebate on the?
On the P card?
Yep.
It's just over 1%, and we give back 1% to the campuses.
So you're not keeping anything?
Well, we try to cover our costs, so what we keep is minimal.
So it's 1%, the Visa is giving us 1%, that's it?
Correct, yep.
Okay, and we're getting like 0.9% of that. And it's going to be a credit towards the overhead, right?
Correct, yep.
On a yearly basis,
So
not quarterly?
the P card rebate is combined with your e-payables rebate, and that's provided as an offset to your assessment each year now.
Okay.
So it's a decrease to your assessment. And actually, Diane Russell is here. She's actually the administrator for the e-payables program and also the administrator for the P card program. So if your campus is interested in enrolling in the P card program, Or if you have a vendor that you'd like, you know, if you have a heavy-hitting vendor that you've just engaged that you think that might be a candidate for e-payables, contact Diane and she'll work with the vendor to see if they can get signed up. And if they get signed up, that's more rebate revenue for the campus. So, and also Stephanie Diet is also here. Stephanie is our purchasing agent here at central office. She also maintains the master vendor file. She does all the supplier file cleanup, so you see emails from her all the time cleaning up the supplier file. So Stephanie's here as well. If you have any supplier file issues, purchasing questions, Stephanie's your contact there.
And I think Bobby's hiding in the back.
Bobby's here too. I didn't see Bob. Bobby just said.
Yep.
So, and Bobby Marbley's here as well. She's our accounts payable specialist. So Bobby's your contact if you ever have check issues. You need a campus check routed somewhere. Contact Bobby. Special requests. Bobby's your person. So, any other questions?
I'm sorry. I missed the conference call this week. The Clean Card program, how are we going at, what status are we at right now?
So we have an executed agreement right now with KeyBank for a prepaid card program. So there's been a little bit of noise in the campuses are trying to push us to say, you know, Greenfire is out there as a Clean Card program, but they're very pricey. So campuses have inquired over the past year or so that it'd be nice to have a prepaid card program in place that could be used for human subjects or for prepaying researchers in the field, what have you. So we have just in the last week entered an agreement with KeyBank for a prepaid card program. It's a MasterCard program, and there's no fees on the back end to the researcher. So if you pre-fund the card for $1,000, the researcher or whoever it's given to has $1,000 that they can use at any place that takes MasterCard or any financial institution. There's no fees on the back end for the most part. I mean, if they,
in KeyBank locations as well.
right, right. So it's kind of a program where we're really trying to push this out to the human subjects arena, because there are some campuses that still hand out cash for research participants. So handing out these prepaid cards is a better option, stronger controls. As a way of paying people. So
For reoccurring payments.
Yeah, there is the prepaid card program. There is a little bit of setup involved because you need to have the payee's name, address. They need to be set up in the supplier file, and we also central office also needs to set up their banking information. So it's really only ideal for cases where there's going to be recurring payments. If it's a one-time payment, check's still the way to go. But for the recurring payments, prepaid cards is the way to go. So, because you can reload them. You pay it as a normal invoice, and then as you reload it, you pay it as a normal invoice. So, but we have some documentation that's going to be when we roll it out here in the next couple of weeks. You'll all be getting the details on the program and how it works. So, any other questions? Yes, Lisa. Yep.
I was curious if any of the campuses are utilizing any e-requisition, or if there's any movement with the Oracle to move towards e-rec, and then a workflow with the purchasing department.
Did everybody hear Lisa? So she said at their campus there's a big push to get away from the paper and
In the last session, we were talking about paperless.
paperless e-recs. Any of the campuses looking at an e-rec system?
States, we have an
State.
that's the only thing.
Okay, on the RF side, are you looking at anything on the RF side? Terry, are you looking for it on
No,
the,
we've had one out there for 3-4.
you use it on the RF side?
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing is, you get that, we end up paying it,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
The same at UB. We've had
Yeah.
one since 2006.
Yeah.
But by the time it gets to accounts payable, we're printing the e-rec. Because we have paper invoices.
Dave, Upstate has one. We don't turn anything into paper.
Okay.
It gets electronically
Yep.
filed.
Okay. And speaking of going paperless, one of our big goals, what things we've been working on here, is really getting away from the paper checks. So we've been pushing the payables program. We've been pushing ACH. We're looking at we've entered the prepaid card program agreement as a way of getting rid of checks. So we're really trying to cut down on the number of AP checks that we print each year. So, any other questions? So I saw a hand over here.
I just want to say that UB has been paperless for some time, but now there's an RFP out right now that a lot of the schools, besides UB and Fredonia, and we're trying to get like a SiteQuest type system, and we'll have a decision reached by June.
Okay.
That's been in process for quite some time.
Okay.